There were 180 of us in the Sultan's army in Dhofar, fighting between 3,000 and 4,000 members of the People's Front, very well trained and armed in the Soviet Union in Odessa. We sat in caves on the Yemeni border waiting for the Idarat political execution squads to come into the Oman in order to do extremely nasty things to the Muslim leaders. On the other side of the mountains, we had to patrol with 6 Land Rovers for 3 years the entire Saudi, Yemeni, Omani border. Basically, after 3 years, I had to leave the Sultan's army, not because I wanted to, but because I was thrown out of the British Army because of the previous lack of A-levels 8 years previously. So I found myself a civilian. About 1968, I got married. She also had no money. The only way that we thought we could make a living was to do what I had been doing back in Germany in the Cold War, which was teaching Scottish soldiers how to canoe and climb in order to stop them beating each other up in the NAFI. When I say my wife, I'm talking about my late wife of 38 years, Ginny. She had all the ideas for the expeditions, and round about 1968, she decided that we would find the lost incense city in the Rub al-Khali, which is the empty quarter, the greatest sand desert in the world. Over the next 25 years, we mounted 8 big 4-wheel drive expeditions into the desert to find it before we did find it in 1992. If you go out there today, it's the biggest excavation works in Arabia. We worked every day, every week for 7 years unpaid, working in local pubs to make a living to pay the gas bill, to get 1,900 sponsors to cover everything we needed without a bank account. That rock there, from that point for 900 miles to the pole, nobody had ever been before. There were no satellites flying over it. It was totally unexplored, unmapped. We would be making the first ever map of it, trained in Cambridge. And how high was it above sea level? Nobody knew. We had to learn to cross crevasses. 5 months later, we set out into the unknown. We did the first ever crossing of the unmapped zone, just under 1,000 miles. When we got there, we discovered that only 3 expeditions in history had been through that bit, the passage, and they'd taken an average of 3 years to get through. We had to ski for 400 miles over the unmapped mountains of Ellesmere Land to get to the edge of the world because our boat was frozen in. 5 months later, we hit the top of the world, became the first humans in history to reach both poles. So we had to put a tent on a bit of ice that was 8 foot deep, hoping it would not break up. And we floated from the North Pole towards Siberia for 3.5 months. The ice broke up, and I have to say we panicked. Water was coming over the tent floor. We were still 300 miles from anywhere. So the ship came 2 months earlier to try and rescue us. That was not a good idea. The ice was too hard. They cracked the hull open and began to sink. The ship got to within 18 miles of us, which is very brave of them because they were going to be sunk. And if you look carefully, you can see us down there. We'd been out for 8.5 months on the moving ice when we got to the ship. When we got on board, humans, for the first time in history, had been vertically around the world. Nobody has ever done it again by any route. We reverted to traditional archaeology, and on the 23rd of November, we found the lost city, 26 years after we started looking for it. We raised 4.2 million from that expedition. So far, as I said, 18.2 altogether. Hopefully 3 million next year on the next one.